Okay, a lot of you already know that Sweet Home was a massive influence on the original Resident Evil. Shinji Mikami, who directed that game, has always been vocal about that.
I had never played Sweet Home myself, but after Resident Evil Requiem, I got a real itch to finally give it a go. The DNA that Sweet Home passed down is obvious from the opening moments of the game, but you know me, I wanted to dig a little deeper.
Sweet Home was a big influence on Resident Evil, but what did Shinji Mikami see that inspired him so much?
So we've got two games to talk about here. Sweet Home released in 1989 on the Famicom in Japan. It never did come to the NES in the West or get an official English translation.
If it did, we would have called it Sweet Home Alabama.
You are seeing it here in English in my video, but I'll let you use your own power of imagination and/or Google to figure out where it came from. The other game is, of course, Resident Evil, also known as Biohazard in Japan, which launched on the PlayStation in 1996, 7 years after Sweet Home. I'll be playing the 2002 remake in this video, FYI. Now, right off the bat, the Capcom Connection here is obvious. The same company developed and published both games, but that's less about inspiration and more about delegation. If you know Resident Evil, then you should already know the name Shinji Mikami, who directed it, but you might not know Tokuro Fujiwara. He directed mid to late 80s Capcom games like Commando, Ghosts and Goblins, and, most important to this video, Sweet Home, produced in parallel with a horror movie of the same name. Capcom was allowed to take some liberties from the film, but at the end of the day, it was still making a licensed game, and that comes with restrictions. Sweet Home was influential, that's the whole point of this video, but I get the sense that Fujiwara didn't quite get to make the exact game he wanted to. So when he moved up to general manager of Capcom, he got a chance to try again. Shinji Mikami told GameSpot about a very important meeting between the two of them that kicked everything off. Quote, "The meeting that got the ball rolling on Resident Evil was in 1993. We were in Capcom's Osaka development studio, and my current boss, Tokuro Fujiwara, called me in to talk to him. He said that he wanted us to make a horror game using systems from Sweet Home. Mikami was commissioned to make a follow-up, and the end result was Resident Evil. To us current players, the inspiration is obvious. It was instant for me as soon as I booted it up. Both games have teams going into a haunted mansion. In Sweet Home, it's a film crew checking out the former residence of a missing artist. In Resident Evil, it's a squad of special agents known as STARS, investigating the Spencer Mansion. Both games have lots of notes lying around that offer clues about what to do next. Both games also use the same kind of recurring animation every time you open a door. What's clearly inspired to us now had to be thought up by Mikami and his team back then. There are plenty of parallels, but there's one particular mechanic that Mikami leaned on the most: item management. To quote him via GameSpot again, "The item management aspect of survival horror is very much similar to how Sweet Home handles it." Mikami makes no secret about this being the biggest influence that Sweet Home had on him. In 2020, he sat down for a lengthy talk at Boca Game Studio, which was actually founded by Silent Hill creator Keiichiro Toyama. As the two like-minded designers talked, Mikami elaborated on the item management aspect of Sweet Home. A lighter would go to one character, another could have a vacuum, and so on. The point was how to survive in an environment with limitations. In the end, that's probably the main thing I took. The player has to make a series of choices with limited resources in order to survive. I kept that, then I made something completely different. So there are two aspects to this: unique tools carried by specific characters, and limited resources. Let's start with the former. Sweet Home has a cast of 5 characters, and each one carries a special tool. Kazuo, the film producer, packs a lighter, which can be used to burn through ropes that block your path, or to fight creepy crawly enemies like maggots and snakes. His daughter Emi carries a key, which can open locked doors. Cameraman Taguchi is there to record video, but he also has a still camera with a flash. With this, you can get snapshots of the old frescoes inside the mansion and do blinding attacks against bats. Director Akiko is able to heal the party's status effects thanks to her remedy, and art restorer Asuka carries a vacuum. That's good for cleaning up the frescoes or removing broken glass on the floor. Right off the bat, you can see how these unique items lead to both diverse gameplay moments and restrictive exploration that requires switching between party members.
You can also see why all that might be too much for one person to carry.
The Sweet Home cast can split up, reunite, and team up as they explore the mansion. Meanwhile, Resident Evil has two distinct protagonists. Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield each have their own partners, but they don't interact with each other as often. With that in mind, Mikami and the team expanded the concept of unique items. Jill gets a lockpick, and I'll let her partner Barry Burton explain why.
It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
Jill also has 2 more inventory slots, and she can get her hands on a taser and a grenade launcher. Chris, on the other hand, has to find small keys instead of carrying a lockpick. But, just like Kazuo, he starts out with a lighter, an important tool for burning zombies to make sure they don't come back once again as stronger Crimson Heads. In addition to the lighter, he gets to wield flash grenades and a flamethrower. He also needs his partner Rebecca Chambers to save him from Plant 42, whereas Jill can kill its roots with a synthesized poison. Sweet Home is a single story in which you actively switch between members of the crew. Resident Evil lets you move through the mansion in 2 separate campaigns. These have unique items, but there are also quite a few smaller items and pickups that actually are shared between Jill and Chris. This brings us to the other side of the item management mechanic: limited resources. For Resident Evil, the most obvious one is ammo. You can only find so much of it inside Spencer Mansion. There is also a set number of healing green herbs inside the house. In Sweet Home, you can find tonics that heal the party the same way, but there's a limited supply. The same goes for pieces of wood, which you'll need to use pretty frequently to cross gaps in the floor, and they don't last forever. This actually reminds me of the wooden boards in Resident Evil 2 Remake. They can be used to block off the windows of the Raccoon City Police Department, preventing extra zombies from climbing inside. Limited resources like these defined Resident Evil as it went on. In all of those games, you also have a pretty small number of inventory slots. That space is a resource too, and I think it's fair to say it's the most limited one. The Sweet Home crew each have their permanent tools, 2 item slots, and 1 weapon slot. That's not a lot to work with. I often found myself swapping out items and coming back later once I had the free space again. In Resident Evil, Jill has 2 more inventory slots than Chris, but they both still have to do the dance of picking up what's needed and discarding what isn't. Thankfully, one of Mikami and the team's innovations was the storage box, so you could drop off any extra items in a centralized place.
I would have loved to have something like that in Sweet Home, but you gotta start somewhere.
There's also an interesting overlap between the unique tools and the limited inventory space. You see, the Sweet Home team can find alternate versions of their tools, which anyone can carry. A wire can pick locks in place of Emmy's key, a broom can clean the frescoes and sweep away glass just as well as the vacuum. There's even a straight-up second camera. So sure, you can negate the need for having just one character use their particular tool, but carrying one of these replacements means losing one of your item spots. Each character only has 2. Likewise, Jill can pick up her own lighter later on, at which point she'll be able to burn zombies just like Chris. But where his is always equipped, Jill must give up one of her precious inventory slots. This balancing act is one of the defining characteristics of survival horror. Many people see Resident Evil as the birth of this genre. I'm not saying that's wrong, but from what we've talked about here, it's clear that survival horror was the next step in a game design philosophy that was already out there, rather than an entirely new thing. Sweet Home wasn't even the only game that preceded Resident Evil in that regard. To go back to that GameSpot article, Mikami credited Alone in the Dark when looking for a solution to some of the team's technological hurdles. That was when we looked at Alone in the Dark. The environments were pre-rendered, and the characters and such were in real-time 3D. It seemed like that approach would allow us to create the game we wanted. The roots of Resident Evil were planted years before the first game came about, but the fruit of the franchise is still blooming today. I see a similarity between the Sweet Home crew and the sewer gators we meet in Resident Evil 7, a game I've gushed about on this channel before.
New plan. We do a walkthrough of the inside first, Then we shoot the intro.
RE7 also took the series' staple of limited inventory space and reimagined it with a new UI and backpacks to expand our heroes' carrying capacity. That concept continued with hip pouches in the aforementioned Resident Evil 2 remake, and of course Leon carried an upgradable briefcase in 4. Call me crazy, but I also couldn't help but look at the haunted dolls in Sweet Home and think of a certain puzzle in Resident Evil Requiem. I do have a full spoiler cast for that game on my Patreon if you want to hear more. Shinji Mikami had more to say in the survival horror space too. Resident Evil 4 was the last title he worked on, but in 2010 he returned to the genre with The Evil Within. These days he's tried to distance himself from those games a bit, just so people don't think of him as a one-note creator. But when the note is Resident Evil, I don't really think that's a bad thing. I'd still love to see him tackle another horror game, maybe even a remake of Sweet Home itself. According to a Eurogamer interview, he's open to it. Quote, "Since it wasn't something that I made myself, I'd be interested in doing a remake of that. I'll hold on to hope for that in the future. For now, I'm very happy with the Resident Evil franchise, and how the team's ideas continued to evolve with each game. I have to credit Sweet Home for helping make that possible. If you can find a way to get your hands on it these days, it's still worth trying out to see the inspiration for yourself." Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel, or even supporting me on Patreon like those folks you see on the right side of the screen. You can also watch another one of my videos on the left. Either way, I'll see you in the next one.